Well, hello. I'm your host, Ron King, and welcome to another edition of The Ron King Show on RKP Radio. Today, we are privileged to have in our studios the talented and very interesting Tom BELLHY, pastor of New Hope Church right here in Washington, Pennsylvania. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here, Ron. Talented and interesting. There's probably some people that argue with that.
I always try to come up with some superlatives to get on the good side of the guest. I mean, it would not be well if I were to say the uninteresting and not that good-looking Tom BELLHY. Tom, you're a native of Washington, Pennsylvania.
Yes, sir.
What grade school and high school did you go to here in town?
I went to down in Tylerdale. If you know the Tylerdale area, I went to St. Hilary Grade School up through 8th grade, and then went to Washington High School. So I'm a little prexy.
Good old Worsh High. In Washington, we do not say Washington High School. We go to Worsh High. I am an alumnus of that school also. Tom, I know you like to say you're from the New Hope Church, ECO. What does ECO stand for?
Yeah, that's the church that I've pastored. I'm going on 8 years there now, out in the Wolfdale area of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. ECO is a denomination, is a Presbyterian denomination. It stands for Covenant Order of Evangelical Presbyterians.
Okay, so it's not the United Presbyterian Church.
No.
I guess there really are like several denominations of Presbyterian.
Actually, I think there's like 20 different denominations of
20
Presbyterian denominations.
Boy, I thought there were like a handful or something.
No,
20.
There's a lot.
That's too. Okay, now you went to high school. You go to college, of course. You told me beforehand that you went to Pitt. And you, Tom, you told me before that when you went to Pitt University one day at school, you had attended a presentation entitled Evidence That Demands a Verdict, put on by a Christian teacher by the name of Josh McDowell. Yes. Did that particular presentation have any impact on your life at that particular time?
Well, as I look back at that and my time at the University of Pittsburgh, you know, on any given telephone pole, you could see some sort of lecture by virtually anybody and any kind of different ideas and philosophies and whatever. I saw this on a telephone pole. Mm-hmm. And it was Josh McDowell spoke at David Lawrence Center there. It was a classroom at Pitt that held roughly probably about 400 students. And so a friend of mine went there with me. And we saw the whole thing about it was Evidence Demands a Verdict. If you know this, it's about Josh McDowell, and he presents this idea of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and how in a court of law, if you presented the evidence, that you would indeed find that to be a true event that occurred. And so as we sat there and listened to it, he gave an altar call at the end, and I understood Christianity at a basic level, but I never understood it from what he was saying. He was talking about this relationship that you could have with Jesus Christ, and I didn't know what he was talking about. But as he gave the altar call, something compelled me to say the sinner's prayer and give my life to Christ. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that right after that, we went out drinking and doing the same old things. But as I look back at that situation, I do think it indeed was a seed that was planted in my life, and that's what God does.
Yes, a little bit at a time. Okay, Tom, you're at Pitt then, and you eventually start doing some counseling work for troubled youth at a place called the Schumann Center in Pittsburgh. About how old were you then, and what kind of work were you doing at the Schumann Center?
Yeah, I was probably about 25 years old. It was a psychology major at Pitt, and ended up counseling juvenile delinquents, which is kind of ironic because I probably should have been counseled myself. And nonetheless, but it was really hard. Mm-hmm. It was a hard job. It was a fruitful job in that you could, talk to the kids and you knew their case histories and you knew where they came from and you tried to help them. And then they would leave and 6 weeks later, be right back there again.
Oh,
and as I was there 3 years, about 3 years, what would happen and what would occur is that you see these kids coming back and back and back again. It felt like I was making no difference.
What am I doing? What am I doing
What am
here?
I doing here?
Just going through the motions. Tom, you told me that during the time that you were doing this counseling of troubled youth, you yourself were also experiencing a troubled, dark time in your own life. What was going on there?
Well, the group of guys that I hung out with, we drank all the time. It's just what it was. It's just the way life was. I mean, you went out drinking. You're done with work, you go out drinking. You're done playing a softball game, you go out drinking. It was just the, I wouldn't say the peer pressure, but it was just what the group of guys did. And, we dabbled in drugs and did various things as I remember growing up in that time. It was my 20s was a very dark time other than a couple bright spots.
Tom, about this time, I know you met a pretty girl at Pitt named Jan,
yes,
and that she would eventually become your wife. What first attracted you to Jan, besides the fact that she was very pretty?
Yeah, she's a beautiful girl, but the thing of it is that, boy, you talk about how God puts blessings into your life, and she is one of them. She is the love of my life. And, the thing about it is that the thing that drew us together mostly is that we were friends. We were just really good friends. We liked to do the same things. We would love to go down to Robert Woolley's down the Strip District and have a fish sandwich and walk trails. And she loved sports. She was an Olympic caliber swimmer.
Wow.
And and I did, and we just really melded. It's a gift from God.
Yeah, God had to make
Yes, He
that
did.
for you. Tom, around this time you were also playing in a rock band and started living the rock band lifestyle with all the drugs and alcohol that sometimes are associated with this kind of living, right?
Yeah, and around that time, I mean, at Pitt, I started playing in coffee houses. And where they didn't really serve coffee.
Were they serving beer and wine?
Beer and wine. It was bars that had that had various places where you could play and sing, and so I did that. And then I moved on from there to play in various bands. But the bands I probably played in the most were Southern rock bands. And boy, we had some wild experiences, and it was certainly, drug related, alcohol related. We would play for motorcycle gangs. And there's some crazy stories there.
Allman Brothers, Leonard Skinner.
Yeah, all that stuff. We had a great fiddle player that could do Charlie Daniels. And,
man.
Yeah.
Devil went down to Georgia.
The good part of the music was great. The bad part was the lifestyle.
Sure.
Yeah.
Tom, so you got around to eventually asking Jan to marry you. When was that?
Well, when all of this, the episodes of my life and all of this stuff, playing music and all of that, I began to move into a real career. And so when I was 28 years old, that's when Jan and I got married. And we got married in a Serbian Orthodox church.
Okay.
And if you remember the movie The Deer Hunter, I don't know if you remember the wedding scene there where they had crowns on their heads and silk scarves.
I have been to that myself.
That's what it was like.
The guy or woman, I don't know who it is, that has to hold the crown above the people that are getting married.
Yes.
I went to one of those down in Charleroi one time. This poor guy, man, he needed somebody to help him. His arms were shaking. Everybody's wondering, when is the minister going to finish the service? Because this guy's going to be dropping the crown on the ground here any second. Okay. So, Tom, after you were married then, I know you were working in financial planning, and with all the stress that does accompany this type of job, and you were still drinking heavily at the time, were you not?
Pretty much, yeah. Once again, I ended up with a few guys there that's just what we did. We'd work till 5, 6, whatever it was, 7. Would go out drinking. would go out to the bars in Pittsburgh and drinking, drugs, whatever the case might be. Yeah, so I was a functioning alcoholic the way I look at it.
Well, here's the thing, though. There's only one thing different in your life, and it's a major difference. You're a married man now. So what did your wife have to say about all this drinking that you were doing?
Well, I look back at that. I'm not so sure that she even knew or understood that's what we were doing. But Jan went to law school at Duquesne University. So as she was in law school at Duquesne University, I would spend a lot of hours at work as well, too. And in fact, working on computers, and perhaps we'll get to that later. But she would get home late at night. I would get home late at night. We were like ships passing in the night for the most part while she was at law school. She was a coach there for the swimming team that paid her way through the school.
So your drinking really wasn't affecting her that much, really?
Did she know? Yeah. Did she know to the extent? Probably not.
Probably not. Tom, I understand that while you were working with this financial planning, you found out you were monkeying around with some computers, and you found you really liked working with computers, and you started getting into that. I guess you eventually, at some point, started your own computer company after a while, didn't you?
Well, what ended up happening is, if you can recall that time, this is in the mid-'80s. In the early 80s, there were no computers anywhere on anybody's desk.
Right.
In the mid-'80s, you started seeing these 8088 computers, IBM 8088 computers.
Sure.
And basically, they were sophisticated word processing systems. Not even sophisticated, they were basic word processing systems and spreadsheets and so forth. So nobody in the office really was adept at any of that. So I would stay late at night once again, because GM was usually at work, and I would mess around with the computers, and I just adapted to it easy. I could do programming and stuff, so I ended up adapting that to financial planning and investment planning at the company that I was.
Okay. Tom, you've told me that on May the 31st, 1986, along with a friend of yours from work by the name of Eric, you two went up to Ohio Pyle, just outside of Uniontown in the mountains up there. And while you were there, you had this peak, powerful religious experience.
Yes,
Do tell us about that.
This story is, it's the story of new life. I mean, it really is. How it happened is it was a beautiful day that day. We went out and we had lunch at Ohio Pyle, and then went to the lower Middle Yawk, if anybody knows where that is. And we went and we sat out on this flat rock that was jutted out into the kind of the middle of the river. And as I'm walking out there, and we were going to just kick our shoes off, stick our feet in the water, talk a while, and I'm thinking, those guys that wrote the Bible, they figured if they would say this Jesus guy walked on the water, well, that would place him, at a divine level for everybody, right?
Right.
And the crazy thing was, no sooner that I thought that and spoke it out, it just, in my heart, mind, and soul, and this, if you have faith in Jesus Christ and you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you know what happens when the power of the Holy Spirit just consumes you. In my heart, mind, and soul, God spoke to me. It wasn't an audible voice or anything like that,
right.
but I knew it. I knew it. And he told me, no, my child, that's not true. My word is true. Plain as day, unmistakable.
Wow.
Supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the next couple hours, it was like sort of this, I was under this dissertation given by the God of the universe. I can't explain it any other way. I mean, it was so compelling that at the end of it all, I had to, I know this, Reformed theologians may have some issue with this, but I was compelled to baptize myself in the water.
Uh-huh.
And I went under, and I came up, baptized in the name of Jesus Christ, and I'll tell you what, the greens were greener, the blues were bluer. And at that time, when all of this occurred, And in my mind's eye, I look back at the guy that woke up that day in bed. I didn't know who it was. When you talk, John, in chapter 3, Jesus talks to Nicodemus, and he says, you must be born again.
Mm-hmm.
Another interpretation might be that you must be born of the Spirit. And each of those equally would happen to me. That I was a new creature. I was a new creation, a new being. I don't know how else to explain it. It changed my life. Alcohol, drugs, all of that gone, completely gone out of my life.
Yeah, it just removed without you basically having to do much of
no counseling,
anything.
no AA, no nothing. I you know, in my pastoral duties, almost don't like to tell addicts that story.
Oh, I know, because
But sometimes I do, and if God's guiding me that way,
yeah, they're
I
in
will.
a 12-step program, and you certainly don't want to blow that for them. Tom, I know that at some point after your experience, you started feeling a calling on your life to actually become a minister. So you got this rock and roll functioning alcoholic who now wants to become a minister. When was that, and what seminary did you finally enroll in?
Yeah. Well, what ended up happening is that Jan and I looked around to find a church. First few weeks after all this, by the way, she thought I was crazy. And then several months after, we were at Settlers Cabin Park, and we sat together, and she gave her life to Christ. And
wow.
And so our journey together as a couple continued to grow in a relationship with Christ, but we struggled to find a church. We ended up at Hickory United Presbyterian Church, which was in Hickory, Pennsylvania.
Our cameraman, John, lives out that way, and I'm sure he well knows Hickory United Presbyterian Church.
That's where we ended up, and so I was there for several years, became an elder of that church. We started a praise band in that church because I could play music, and I never grew up with hymns in the Catholic Church whenever, this was before the Second Vatican Council, when I was growing up in 1965. And so what you would sing in there, I mean, it wasn't the hymns like most Protestants grew up with.
Sure.
So I didn't know him. So we started a praise band of contemporary Christian music. And my relationship with God continued to grow. The Holy Spirit just compelled me one day in 2002, after I had a business, Fort Pitt Capital Group that I started in 1995, and it was a thriving, great company. We turned a corner where the skies were blue, the sun was shining. I mean, this was fantastic business. It was Christian based, at least as far as I could lead.
Yes.
I was the CEO, was the president there. We started a mutual fund. I was the CEO of the mutual fund as well. And one day, it was October of 2002, and unmistakable again. It's like the Holy Spirit grabbed me, kind of like nape of my neck and said, okay, you're going to go into ministry now. And I'm like, what? What?
Say what?
Like, Lord, you kidding me? I mean, it's so...
Things are rosy here.
Okay, yes. And so I accepted the call, and I went to my partners Jan and I prayed about this, and she knew it was right too, and I knew it was right too. And we prayed about it. I went to my partners, and I said, listen, I'm being called into the ministry. I'm going to have to leave the job here. And really, one by one almost, each one of them said, you know what, that doesn't surprise me. So, cool. I mean, that was a bit of a
bit of a blessing.
Yeah, it was.
But they didn't give you a hard time.
No, they didn't give me a hard time at all, and they helped usher me into it, and I went.
You went to seminary. Which seminary did you?
Seminary was Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary, which is out toward Wilkinsburg, Point Breeze area.
Okay.
And wonderful seminary. It's the fifth oldest seminary in the country. And small, but it was absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to school, learned how to become a minister, and eventually you did become a minister, and we move forward to the present day, and now, here you are, many years later, and now you're the pastor at New Hope Church, right here in Washington, PA.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that you're in the process of opening a Christian coffee house in a building right next door to this studio on Main Street in downtown Washington. Is that right?
That's right. The old G.C. Murphy's building. If you're old enough,
I'm old enough.
Remember the old G.C. Murphy's building,
Yeah.
5 and 10.
Uh-huh.
Right. If for those of you that are under probably 50 years old, I don't know, maybe you don't remember that, but it was the old 5 and 10, and it was so many different things over the years. Art gallery.
At one time in the 50s, it truly was the prime tenant of the downtown.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, when you go into the malls now, they'll have a Macy's or a Giant Eagle as the prime tenant. That's some big box store like that, Lowe's.
Yeah.
But in those days, no malls, and Murphy's was the epicenter of commerce here in the downtown Washington, Pennsylvania area.
Yes.
Okay, so you're over there. Just before the show, our cameraman John and I walked the next door, and he's over there, and it looks like he has some plasterboard or something, and he's literally with his own hands building this coffee house. What are you going to call the coffee house when it's finished?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that question. We haven't come up with a name yet.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, we keep wrestling with this idea of the name, only because this whole thing, the whole idea is a mission here in the middle of the city. I mean, I love this city. I grew up here. You'd be 10 years old, and my mom would give us 20 cents or so, nickel to ride the bus up, and we would walk around town here. We'd go to the old YMCA. It was a quintessential, kind of like a Norman Rockwell painting, really. It was a beautiful little town.
As a matter of fact, I have a couple of those paintings on the wall right over there. Is a downtown Washington.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get a copy of that.
I think I got cars from like the
Yes, that works.
1920s going down South Main Street. Well, listen. I tell you what. We'll ask this question and then another one. If you folks out there have any suggestions, it doesn't mean that Tommy's going to take them. But if anybody listening has any suggestions as to what you would like to see the coffee house called, do you have a website that people can contact you, Tom?
Yeah, it's New Hope City Center. That's what we're calling the whole thing. See, it's more than a coffee house. It's going to be Christian counseling. It's going to be adult tutoring for math, reading, and writing. And it's going to be, we have a floral design operation that we're going to put together to help teach people for floral design. It's awesome. It's God breathed, I'm telling you. And then the other side is going to be a coffee shop that's going to be open to the public from 6 to 2 once we get it all fixed up. And then on Friday evenings, we're going to have coffee house from 7 to 10.
That sounds great. What about a phone number if anybody wanted to give you a call?
Well, it's newhopecitycenter.org if you want to look at the website.
Okay.
For a phone number, it's 724-986-1950.
For broadcasting sake, once again, please.
724-986-1950.
Call now. Operators are standing by, more or less. Well, Tom, I see that our time is just about up for this edition of the Ron King Show. Thanks so much for coming into our studios today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been wonderful to be here. I never get tired telling the story, and we all have stories.
Oh, you have an awesome testimony. And so then, folks, on behalf of Pastor Tom BELLHY of New Hope Church in Washington, Pennsylvania, this is Ron King of RKP Radio saying, so long till we catch you next time on The Ron King Show.